Norman castles in England. There was William the Conqueror from Normandy, northern France, coming over to England, and he started then to build castles. For example, he started to build first in timber and earth the White Tower in London. And when it was built, the White Tower in London with stones. And like that, 2,000 of these Norman castles were then over the centuries built in England. Like 1,000 years earlier, the Roman camps all over the country to control from these castles out of the country. And they were oftentimes at the bend of the river or at a good place at the cliff to have a good outlook and view of the surrounding. Chateau Gaillard, which would be in France, is an example of such a situated castle. And there was then the big tower in the center, and then oftentimes there were then added more walls with towers from which archers could shoot, and then ditches were widened and deepened and filled with water to make them moats. The lord was living in the central building, and then there were quarters for the troops, for the soldiers, and also stables for the animals. And examples like Dover Castle or Stepstow grew then to become almost like a little village. The whole purpose of it was that it could withstand sieges, so that they could live for weeks or months without access to food or water from the outside. And these castles were built to impose the power of a ruling lord, to collect from that places out taxes, even if the population was resisting for that purpose. And around the 15th century, when these castles weren't built anymore, there were some changes. For example, the feudal system wasn't so much in use anymore. That was that the king was assigning land to the lord, which was then governing it, something like that. And other things like also that the administrative system changed a bit and there was more power by the king. So these castles weren't used so much anymore. And another thing also is strategically, the reason is there that gunpowder was invented, and now if such a castle was attacked, it was no longer a sword or spears or arrows against these walls, but it was now, and maybe a few catapults with some stones thrown, it were now cannons, because gunpowder was invented, and against these cannons, these castles weren't working so good anymore. So from the 15th century on, these castles weren't built so much anymore, and not at all, and the old ones were oftentimes falling to ruins. And that is according to the history of the kings and queens of England and Scotland, written by Edmund Swinglehurst on the page 40 and 41. The positions and views expressed are the ones of the source and don't necessarily align with my own, or the ones of the entities spoken of. Hi and welcome. I am trying to learn castle studies today, Norman castles, and after we've done that, we're going to do stretching. And if you participate in the stretching, then it's at your own risk. And it's the second time that we're reading it. And now we're trying to puzzle the information together to a little presentation, the one which are named here. Norman castles. The first castle built by William the Conqueror as a stronghold from which to govern in England was made of earth and timber. In the course of the next 100 years, buildings became a symbol of Norman power, and the White Tower rising above the Thames was the first of many which arose throughout the country, much as Roman camps had done. So the Norman who had come with William the Conqueror to England started to build these castles in the Norman style, like the Romans did it with all their camps in different regions to govern from there out. And the first one built were made with earth and timber, but the first one almost directly built with stones was then the White Tower in London. Now we have here the White Tower of London also, and there's written that it was when, although the Roman foundations have been discovered, the White Tower was built 1078 by Gundulf, Bishop of Rochester, as a royal residence and fortress. Construction began in 1078 and was completed some 20 years later. So it was built in a simple timber and earth style by William the Conqueror a few months after his victory at Hastings in October 1066. So 1067, William the Conqueror building at that place the Tower of London in timber and earth. 1078, so 10 years later, then Gundulf, the Bishop of Rochester, then the White Tower, I think more or less as it is existing today. built everywhere in England and the country to govern. They were strongholds occupied by ruling lords and bodies of troops and imposed the royal will. So there was living the ruling lord of the region from which it was then governed, and also were there the soldiers of the troops, and it used to govern or to impose the royal will from that place out. Once the initial tower were built, often on mounds of earth or existing hillocks, the perimeter was expanded. I think, no, I don't know it. What is the perimeter? Let's look it up. I want to get the dictionary. It's not the first time that I'm looking it up, but I forgot it. Perimeter. About and metron, measure. Metron means measuring in Latin. Okay. Now, geometrically, the boundary of a body or figure. So it is not the circumference. Circumference is the roundabout. The perimeter is similar, or the sum of all its sides. Perimetrical, pertaining to the perimeter. So it is the circumference, but it doesn't have to be in a circular thing. Okay. Once the initial tower were built, often on mounds of earth or existing hillocks, the perimeter was expanded. A defense wall was added with towers from which archers could snipe at enemies, and the ditches were deepened and widened and filled with water to make a moat. So they built first the tower, oftentimes on a mound of earth or an existing hillock. I don't know what a hillock is, on a mound of earth or hillock. And then they built around it more. Oftentimes a defensive wall with towers so that archers could shoot from them, and then also ditches in the ground which were widened and deepened and filled with water and became then a moat. The lords and their courts lived in the central building, and around them were living quarters for troops, stables, and all the services required for a self-contained community that might have to withstand a siege. So lord and court living in the central tower building. Around them were the quarters for the troops and the stables for the horses, and other things necessary to live for a longer time, so maybe more animals than just horses, so that the castle could withstand a siege. In many cases, such as Dover and Chepstow, further walls and buildings were added until the castle took on the appearance of a village. And for example, by Chepstow Castle and Dover Castle, more walls were added and more buildings, and it became almost like a little village. Norman architecture was solid, with thick walls. These castles had thick walls, and round arches in the Romanesque style. I guess what we have there on that picture, these round arches. And some round arches in Romanesque style. However, once Gothic architecture had made its appearance in northeastern France, the Normans adapted the new style, and later Norman castles in England have a lighter appearance. The thick walls around arches in Romanesque style. Then, over the time, the Gothic architecture was more included, and the Norman castles in England during that time became lighter. The Normans built some 2,000 castles in England, and they fulfilled a useful purpose until the 15th century as means of keeping order and collecting taxes from a sometimes troublesome population. To govern and impose from their will out, to control the people and impose and collect the taxes. The end of feudalism and of private armies and the increased power of monarchs through administrative systems made castles less essential, and the use of gunpowder diminished their effectiveness as strongholds. Through the invention of gunpowder and the use of cannons, castles were not that good anymore during wartime or to withstand a siege. The administrative system has shifted and the monarch had more power. And also the system of feudalism, where the people, I don't understand it. It is described here. It is probably as simple as it's explained here, but I don't really get it. The people living there and are paying taxes or tributes to the lord which is living there. They have to sometimes go and help to the lord for war efforts. The lord is then sending people living there to the war. And I don't get it. Is it that? Why is it? What makes it then a feudal system? What would be another system which is not a feudal system during the medieval times? That would be not the case. Okay, the system of feudalism entered and private armies, and of private armies, and also whatever it means. So, increased power of a monarch through the changing of the administrative system and invention of gunpowder, making them less effective less withstanding during a siege. In the 13th century, the castle, which was around the 15th century, in the 13th century, the castle became increasingly sophisticated. Living and administrative quarters were moved from the keep into new buildings raised within the bailey. The keep, made smaller and stronger, became the final defensive position within a series of battlements. A castle was often built on the edge of an impregnable cliff, ideally at a bend in the river where it could command a view of the surrounding countryside. So building at a high cliff or the bend of the river to have a good overlook of the countryside. The Chateau Gaillard, built by Richard I, King of England in Les, France, is an example of a strategically located castle. For example, you might name it Chateau Gaillard, built by King Richard I of England in Les in France. The use of gunpowder and projectiles brought to an end the impregnability of the medieval castle. After 1500, the construction of castles was no longer feasible, and castle became a term for an imposing residence. It was part of the gunpowder again. Let's see to the middle part again. In the 13th century, the castle became increasingly sophisticated. I don't really understand what word is sophisticated. Living and administrative quarters were moved from the keep into new buildings raised within the bailey. The keep, made smaller and stronger, became a final defensive position within a series of battlements. Bail, a person to whom goods are committed, bailey. I don't know. Let's look at keep. Bailey, written with an Y at the end. Keep. Kept. To hold, to retain one's power possession, to keep on foot. It's a long answer. You can't read it. To remain in any position of state, or keeperless, not having a keeper, keeping. Okay. Probably means that, no, I don't really get it. It's obviously the last thing there. Whatever. We're going to focus on the little sentence in the next part. If you were here for castle studies, you can go directly to the next part of castle studies. We're going to look one moment more at what was meaning that sentence. Otherwise, we have all together. And when I try to make the presentation, if you stay here and participate in the stretching, then it's very honest. Have your feet standing together. Augen auf one foot and the other foot. Heels and heels. And again, toes, heels and heels. And go as far as you can go. And then back in again. This time stay down in the knees. Up again. Legs a bit apart, raising the arms up. And breathe out, go to the side. In middle. Out to the other side. In middle. Out over one side. Breathe in. Out one arm over. In and out the rib cage. Out and back. again in. Out the other hand, slides down the leg. Breathe again in. Out one arm up. In and out the rib cage. Out and back. In the arms up. And out and reach. Up. Out and reach. Up. Out and down. Have a good and stable stance. Shoulder circles back, up and front and down. Back, up and front and down. The other way around, front, up, back and down. In the shoulders up. Out and foot down. In and up. Out and down. In the arms up. And reach always with one arm high up. Pretend to take an apple hanging high on an apple barrel. To turn it a bit around and then to harvest it. And the legs apart. In the arms up, breathe in. And out, go out one side. In middle. Out to the other side. In middle. And out, lean onto the knees. Breathe in. And out one shoulder in front. In and back. Out the other one. In and back. And out and we're hanging down. Breathe again in. And out to one leg. Breathe again in. Out to the other leg. Breathe again in. Out middle and close the feet. Breathe again in. And out. Again in. And out comes slowly with a round back up. Back as my jump backwards, shoulder. The feet are standing a bit apart, in the arms up. Breathe out, sink down. Elbows against the inside of the knees. Breathe in, straighten up. And out come with the back up. Breathe again in. Out and down. In and straighten up. Out come slowly in one straight line up. Hands again down. Have a good standing leg, the heel of a normal leg on top of a knee of a standing leg, breathe in. Out, sink down. Up again. Change the position of the feet, breathe in, and out, sink down. Up again. Feet to the side, breathing it down. Out, open the rib cage or the chest to the sky. In and up. Out and down. In and up, and out, up, out and down, in and close the legs, and out. That was a stretching. I thank you very much, and until next time.